What's up, guys? So today we wanted to take a moment and kind of do an after action review and give you guys a little bit of insight as Bob from Refuge Medical and my experiences with Hurricane Helene and the aftermath that was associated with it in both Eastern Tennessee and Northern North Carolina. We were on the ground there for right around 10 days. When we first got there, it was still a very dynamic situation. The leadership in both the county and the state were still struggling to even communicate with each other. And not communicate in terms of like effective communications, but literally to just make communications with each other. We still had, cell phone networks were down everywhere. Everybody was using radios to make the most basic of communications, and because so many areas were out of power, we were trying to charge our radios off of generators, and that was causing issues with logistics to supply fuel, and people were getting exhausted, so they were putting gasoline into diesel generators and diesel into gasoline generators, and so there was a cascading effect of issues that were just surrounding making communications, right? So we arrived and we automatically partnered with another great organization called Amron. Amron sent out very experienced, awesome ham radio operators that were self-sufficient, that were self-supporting, to come and set up a commo base inside of the Grindstone Ministries FOB, the forward operating base, and basically supply us with radio operators that could go out into the field, that could position inside of cutoff communities. And that's really what our main focus was getting into these cutoff communities and making sure that they had their needed items. And so not in the sense of just like cat litter or, even food and water. Food and water was very critical, but we were worried about insulin and oxygen and medications. And so we were working with paramedics and then doctors and nurse practitioners, right, and trying to get all of these medications in or just needed items, whether it's oxygen or insulin, to the right people in the right time frame. There were communities that were elderly, that were cut off. The roads were absolutely destroyed, and so we're carrying in crates of oxygen for individuals just to make sure that they have the proper air, as well as new regulators, new nasal cannulas, all these different devices that are associated with it, because so many people just lost everything. Obviously, you've seen the conspiracies that are surrounding the event. We experienced a ton of weirdness, from the lack of government support to sometimes the opposition from the federal government, telling us, "Oh, you don't need to do that." Okay, well, who's going to go help these people? Oh, we'll figure it out. Okay, but what is your timeline to implement help? Because we're willing and we're able and we're qualified to go help right now. Well, we don't want you to land your aircraft there. Well, why is the reason you don't want us to land an aircraft there? We have our own aircraft, it's private. We're running our own fuel, it's privately funded. We have our own volunteers that are privately supported. There's no regulation to them. But we saw multiple times they would close the airspace, or the air boss wouldn't allow us to land in a certain location because the government might need to land there. But when we tracked APRS, which is aircraft tracking, it's a way that we track aircrafts. There's nobody flying in there, and even still, if they turn their APRS, which the government can do, if they turn it off, through visual tracking, there's nothing landing in those areas. And so there's a lot of weird instances like that were constantly happening. I personally have never used my aid bag more. I had one of my packs that I built out here with me all the time, and it was everything from small lacerations to cuts to bruises to scrapes to serious cuts, to over-the-counter medication, to all these different things to help facilitate support, to IVs, to fluids to people who are dehydrated, they haven't had water, they've been cutting trees, all this different stuff. Very, very intensive. And I was really grateful to the paramedics that were there, that had come and volunteered and donated their time to support in that higher level of care as well. There was quite a few times that people had to have drug administered, and I'm not qualified to do that. And so they were super talented in what they did. And these were not easy conditions. This wasn't like we were sitting in a room and sick people were coming to us, or that like we'd set up some field hospital, because the field hospital had to be mobile. Nobody had vehicles, and even if you did have vehicles, there were so many roads that were still absolutely destroyed. You couldn't use your vehicles to traverse. You needed to have trucks, and every truck needed to have a saw team with it, and it was best if the saw team also had a piece of equipment to lift trees off the way, or to push debris or rock or silt out of the way, so that way vehicles could move through. This existed for the first couple days that we were there. When we got an aircraft, we started doing a lot of aerial recon as to where we were going to put saw teams and support teams and deliver logistics, like deliver either pallets of water or generators or clothes or heating elements, buddy heaters, propane, gasoline, diesel, all these different, resources. How are we going to get it to them in the field? And through doing aerial reconnaissance, it was quite obvious that this storm had a much larger impact than anything on the national news was talking about. Multiple tornado tracks on the sides of the mountains, whole communities landslided in, and that quickly gave us the realization that the death count was much higher than anybody was talking about. I think the official report at that time was maybe 125 or 150 people. And there was whole communities that lost that. I watched individuals need everything. I watched people need so much help. And I was so blessed to be there and to help and support. And I was so blessed to see Refuge Nation rally behind us and supporting, just like donating oxygen, like getting that to people was huge. Getting med kits to people was huge. We had 100 volunteers out in the field, and each one of them was able to get a tourniquet because of you guys, or just a boo-boo kit. And that might not seem like a big deal, but like when you're dealing with contaminated water and contaminated mud and all these odds that are up against you, like the ability to clean a wound inside of these austere environments, because you're not going to be back at the fob where a nurse can look at you for another 6-8 hours, and to casevac somebody because of a laceration seems silly, but it might need to happen. But it's resources that are getting tied up, so the ability to get these guys these materials and then also get the people in the community these materials was huge. So you guys made all that possible. Your support meant the world to us. And that's what Refuge is all about. Refuge is about saving lives while in service to the Father's kingdom and experiencing the abundance of his provision and blessing. Obviously, there was a million lessons learned throughout this, but I did want to go over a couple of key ones with you as we went through the entirety of our time at the deployment, and what we learned. So the first thing, this is some lessons on how we didn't die while we were there. The first thing is we had radios, and we knew how to use them. Not just in VHF and UHF, but also having experienced ham operators that were there, understanding how to use different repeaters in different ways, how to bounce signals off of the ionosphere to get messages out in a wide spectrum, and how to properly use APRS to track people in the field. These radios, whether it's a Baofeng or a Yaesu or whatever you have, are great tools. They're being underutilized right now in the space. That's why we have Evan with Radio Made Easy coming out to do a class here at the beginning of next year. If you guys haven't signed up for that, you need to. You really do, especially if you don't have a good understanding of your radio. I have a decent understanding of radios, and I'm going to be taking that class again. And I know there's multiple other people in this office that are going to be doing the same thing, as well as I'm going to be seeking out higher radio learning. Seeing the power in these tools is huge. So radios. It's shoot, move, communicate, sustain. Well, if you can't sustain communication, you're dead in the water. And so this is a huge asset that we had. The next thing was having medical gear on your person in a variety of capacity, and then also having a backstock of your expendable items. So your gauzes, your tapes, your wipes, your cleaners, your Band-Aids, your wraps, These were all things that flew. They like rapidly. Sports injuries were huge. Cleaning wounds was huge. Cuts, lacerations, small scrapes, falls, bumps, bruises. I think we almost had a break or a fracture. All of these things were really, really big. So these are all items that take up space. And so having some ability to backstock, whether that's a wound care bucket or whether that's, a bag with a bunch of components in it that's kind of just a backstock bag, I found that to be very useful on deployment. I came in and even today, I took a good amount of time and just refilled my bag from stuff that I had used. Gloves, and more gloves. Seriously, buy boxes of gloves. And I can't say that enough because it went so quickly. Because you're changing your gloves rapidly, and you don't want to touch anything that's not clean, and you don't want any of the grossness that's on them on you, and you don't want to get any extra grossness in them. And so that was a huge thing throughout the treatment of a variety of different problems that we were seeing in the field, whether it's just like people were getting sick, which is happening a lot. People weren't able to shower, so they weren't able to stay clean. Hygiene was decreasing. And when hygiene decreases, you have illness and viral infection and bacterial infection. All those things go up, right? And so being able to create a little bit of space to separate to then offer any sort of treatment or aid that you can was huge. And then obviously you have like the basic stop the bleed stuff. That was used a lot in the field. A lot of people with chainsaws, a lot of tourniquets, right? A lot of wound packing. Thankfully, no chest seal. There was a couple of shootings that happened while we were there. Thankfully, we weren't involved. We know where they happened. We heard them when they happened, but it was not us, right? And we weren't there, and we didn't have to respond, which is good. As a blessing. But also being able to support law enforcement and then EMS they were absolutely exhausted. I saw more breakdowns from emergency professionals on their 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th day, where they were just like, I'm done. You can only work 17, 18, 20 hours a day so long before your body just gives up. And we were seeing that. And so having your medical gear and having a backlog was huge. Next thing was PPE. This is something that a lot of people don't bring to deployments that maybe we should be really thinking about moving forward. There was some stuff that hit that river that we weren't really considering at the very front. So having good rubber boots, having good masks, having even a Tyvek suit that you can get surplus online in case you do run into an exposure, hard hats, glasses, and not just like flimsy little diaper masks, but like actual respirators was a big thing. That was something that I had brought, was like a couple of gas masks and respirators. Shout out to Mira Safety. That they helped me a lot on that. But having that capability on hand was very, very important. Because it mitigated a lot of risk to me, so that way I could keep being a force for good, right? It wasn't just like about selfishness that I needed to be protected. It was that if you don't have your priorities of safety inside of an emergency, your number one being you, your number two being your buddy, your number three being the bystander, and your number four being the victim, you quickly create more problems for yourself. So PPE was huge inside of this event. And then most importantly, and finally, and obviously there was food and water, but eternal food was huge. Spiritual readiness and spiritual fitness was absolutely pivotal inside of this event. So much death, so much decay, so much loss. And if you weren't fortified in the spirit of the Most High God, of Jesus the Christ, Yeshua Messiah, the true King, at times you were just wandering. And I saw that. And it was such an opportunity to witness to the goodness of our Lord and Savior. I saw so many miracles, time and time again. The Most High was moving and breaking down walls and shattering barriers and almost showing off how powerful and how good he was if you would simply just come to him. And that's why this book says, come to me, those who are tired, who are weary, I will give you rest. Knock and the door will be open for you, right? Seek and ye shall find. And through the seeking that happened on this deployment, the spiritual fitness grew inside of so many individuals, and I was very inspired by that. There's a lot of people that are being sensationalists about this online, and that sucks because there's still a lot of people that are hurt. We still have individuals that are on the ground deployed. that are doing good works. Pray for them. Pray for their fitness. Pray for their capability. Pray for their mental state. Pray for their emotional state. Pray for their spiritual state. Pray that the enemy would not have any strength against them. And know that while this continues on, we have to build our own lines of preparedness. We have to be more capable to protect ourselves, because we saw it very clearly, very, very clearly. No one is coming to save you from the government. I cannot tell you how many times we came upon sites that were cleared by the FEMA search and rescue teams that had corpses in them. That's not a new occurrence. And it is up to us. It is up to you to take personal accountability and personal responsibility for yourself and for your family. And I've never been more inspired by the American spirit. I've never been more humbled by my fellow American to see how we responded. I hope that we keep that same spirit in the coming season. I hope that we see the way that we can rally amongst each other, that we can build, literal forces of aircraft and come and deploy to help people, to do good. Don't forget that. That's what built this country. If you have questions, leave them in the comment section below. I'll try to answer them the best I can. If we need to make another video about it, about specific things, we absolutely will. I'm sure Lauren will communicate the questions to me, and I'll try to answer it, in a timely manner. Understand there's stuff that I'm not going to talk about. There's stuff that I will talk about. But this is what Refuge is about. This is why we do what we do. And this is what your money goes to when you support a company like this. We didn't go on a yacht vacation this year. We went and deployed there because that's what we're about. Saving lives while in service to the Father's kingdom. We love you guys. Bless you, Refuge Nation. Thank you.